I just spoke with one of my coworkers. He's Hispanic, and we were talking about history and how the Mexican people may be close to the Indian people in genetics. They have tan skin, jet black hair. We all know the history of how the Indians were pushed out west, and then as the Westerners or the cowboys and developers were moving out west, the Indians migrated south, and then they started making their way back up, which is why a lot of places in America have Hispanic names or roots. Now, that's not excluding the black culture that was here, the Creole, the Gullah, the native blacks who lived off the land as well, or the whites that potentially migrated south from Canada and places like that. We're only speaking on a particular generation of America. Now, with that being said, or the land before it was called America, with that being said, me and him had a mutual agreement of how now that we are adult males, when we were coming up, we would hear stories about how our dads are bad people, how men are bad people, how they didn't love the women, but we only hear that from the women. When we talk to the men go, I really loved her. She just didn't see the vision that I saw for myself. Or I really loved her, but she wanted me to live in servitude of her and abandon my own dreams and goals. So I say that to say this. If you're as conscious as me and that Hispanic guy, then if you live in a household ran by your mother and she has nothing nice to tell you about your father, she's speaking from a place of hurt, damage, and mental distortion between whether or not that man was a good man and whether or not he was a good man for her, and vice versa. She's speaking from a place of whether or not she's a good woman and was she a good woman to him. When I spoke to the guy who was allegedly called my dad, I spoke to him about 4 years ago, and I was like, look, man, I know this is a sensitive subject for you, but I'm not an idiot. My mom had 4 kids, all within about a year to a year and 4 months apart from each other. And I'll say that to say this. I'm 36. Christina turned 37 in December. Michael turned 38 in October, the end of October, and Teresa turned 39 at the beginning of October. That is 4 kids, 3 different baby daddies, or 3 different dads or fathers, and the youngest 2 kids, not even sure who their biological father is. And knowing my mom's story of her moving out of her mom's house at 15, a 15-year-old living in Walterboro, South Carolina in the late 1900s pinpoints these possible scenarios. My mom had a desire for a life that she wanted to live. Her mom was more modest. My grandma, love her to death. God bless her soul. She passed away last year. But my grandma is a modest lady. My mom was a party woman, a curious woman, an active woman. And so when she moved out at 15, a 15-year-old not making much money in the 1980s had a limited of options in that small town. One, she couldn't drive. Right, so she could only travel so far without walking or taking a bus or a train. Two, the men in that area needed love and affection of a woman. So the 20-year-olds and late 20-year-olds, possibly 30-year-olds that would take her in might have even took her in while exploiting their sexual desires through her. And as a 15-year-old woman, young lady, or girl trying to find her way as a woman and a lady, thought that these men who rescued her from homelessness or rescued her from starvation or rescued her from financial struggle in some way, shape, or form was a good guy for her. What I think added into that is that she looked at it as being rescued, but didn't fully look at it as these guys are only helping me because I'm a female and they want sex. It wasn't these guys are helping me because they cared about me and my future. And equal in return, she could have been helping those guys through sexual needs, food desires, or just somebody to talk to and listen to them as they face their own individual challenges in the world. So with this in mind, I can't knowingly accept my mother telling me that my dad is a bad dad because their relationship ended. Because the relationships I've had with the two guys that have potential to be my biological father, they both tell me stories about how my mother cheated on them. They tell me stories about how their life was and what they were doing in life. And the one thing they both have in common is they try to paint my mother to be a good woman and hide their own personal misery from the damage she caused to them mentally and emotionally. Whereas my mother, on the other side, she paints them to be the villains and hide the personal things that they did for her that were good. And that's why me and my mom have issues, because I've learned at a young age that she would rather fixate on the bad things that happened to her than to talk about the good things that people did for her. Same as when I would come home, if I had a bad day at school because some kid thought they could vocally bully me and I say something back, she, instead of her being a mother who goes, well, son, I'm proud of you for speaking up for yourself, she goes, you should know better than that. And I'm like, I do. But I also know that if I allow somebody to bully me, they'll continue bullying me. So I stopped the bullying. And still to this day, me and her are constantly clashing because she's a small female in this big old world. I'm a average sized, decent sized guy in this big old world. She looks at it from a small, scared female perspective. I look at it from a dominating male perspective. She looks at it as from a perspective of lower education or a woman who's been abused before, so it's easier for her to comply. I look at it as I know whoever tries to abuse me can die, so I don't easily comply. All right? And I'm not saying that rules and regulations aren't justifiable for the people who choose to follow those rules and regulations. But for those people who don't really agree with the rules and regulations that are trying to be forced upon them, that is our personal prerogative. That is our personal decision. And it should not be up to another human being to try to force us to comply to the rules of other people. Let's say, for example, let's take slavery. Slavery would have never ended if it wasn't for the people who fought. Right? The Holocaust would have never ended if it wasn't for the people who fought. All right? The Civil War in America, the World War I, World War II, all these, the Spanish War in Mexico, all of those wars would have either never happened or they wouldn't have went the way that they did if it wasn't for people willing to speak up against tyranny, against bad behavior. Like if somebody came over to my land and try to take my land by force and I fight back, the people around me should be supporting the fact that I fought for what's mine, not trying to tear it down. That's the same thing with the mentality of life. If I'm standing up for myself, my support system is supposed to support the fact that I'm speaking up for myself. They're not supposed to side with somebody who's never lived in our household, never sat at our tables, never really made a rule that was designed for us to thrive. So when people try to force the Bible on me, the Bible is a book of compliance. The Bible is a book of some individual or spirit named God that no one has ever actually met. And I find it interesting how we have a picture of the devil, but nobody knows what God looks like. I find it interesting that they said there was only one God, but the book says we made man in our image. I find it interesting that the book of the Bible was written by humankind and it was reinterpreted from other books. So it's not even 100% accurate. And with all this information and knowledge that I've learned and received over the years, I literally just want to live my life. I don't want to try to control somebody else's. I don't want to be controlled by somebody. So when people go, I'm your boss, I go, no, you're my coworker. When people go, I'm your leader, I go, no, you're just another human in America or in the world that has an opinion that you think you should force upon me based on what the majority said is acceptable. But I am a firm believer in making my own rules. Because if a leader is a type of person that make their own rules, even if my rules go against the normal rules of society, they're still the rules of self. Now, there's certain things I've come up with that other people acknowledge and they tend to utilize in certain conversations that they're having. And I respect that. Now, I don't want to go as far as saying that I am their God, but I am a form of leadership. I am a form of motivation. I am a form and a voice of guidance and reason and logic. And because of my voice, my reason, and my logic, I can't idly sit by and let people belittle my nature based on their limitations of life. Like, if LeBron James was told he only has to follow the rules of NBA that was created 50 years ago, then he wouldn't be who he is. If every dunker dunked the same and only the same way, then they wouldn't have broke records in the NBA. If every football player only passed for 2,000 yards, it wouldn't be so valuable for high-paid quarterbacks, high-end wide receivers, tight ends, defensive backs. Like, basically what I'm saying is every person in the world is considered value based on what record they broke, created, that was set as a standard before they broke the record. So if my record as a human is to live in peace and harmony while still managing to stand up towards bullies, whether it be parents, friends, family, co-workers, law enforcement, other countries, people within the country, then that is my individual record. I know as a 36-year-old man, there's going to be a lot of things that I say that will, or that I do, that will go against what people consider the social norm. But I am a firm believer in being anti-enslaved. So every rule that a person creates that isn't in my best interest is not necessarily a bad rule for others, it's just not a good rule for me. And because it's not a good rule for me, the only thing I've been asking for the 34 years of me being able to talk is that people let me be myself. If I don't ask for a person's opinion, then I don't need them to give it, right? Like, when people mention my drug dealing days, I go, yeah, but when you go to the pharmaceutical companies and you purchase medicine from them, you are literally buying a drug. So because I don't require you to go to some doctor who takes a guess at what could be wrong with you, if I don't go to some doctor who takes a guess at what medicine could be good for you, for example, if I've never seen a doctor in my life and never encountered a certain chemical that I could possibly be allergic to, I don't know it, the doctors don't know it, the staff on the medical team don't know it. But they're willing to chance it in order for me to feel better and to actually get the medical treatment that I need. It's no different than being a street pharmaceutical. If a person is used to taking Percocets, but they don't make enough money to financially budget their money, to pay for the insurance, to get the medical discounts, to get the proper doctors, to get the primary physicians, so they come to a street dealer and go, hey, my mom used to give me these when I had injuries, migraines, and back pains. Can you help me get them? And I go, yeah. They already know that their body can withstand that medicine. So for somebody to come up to us and go, well, how do you know if somebody is allergic? Because they have already been taking it before they got to me. Well, how do you know that person won't OD? Because they're still alive today. Well, how do you know that this won't da-da-da-da-da? Because this person knows their own body. And so to be the doctor that I am, I judge them based on their historical actions and not my own assumptions. Like, if I assumed every human is stupid, that would offend a lot of humans. If I assume that every woman was a bad woman because she's selfish and self-entitled and then act like men can't be selfish and self-entitled, that would offend a lot of women. If I tell men that there's always a stronger man out there, as men, we already know that. As men, we know we're not the only smart guy in the world. As men, we know we're not the only handsome, good-looking, well-spoken man in the world. As men, we know there's way more money to get in the world. But it seems like women and the mass society who crave the affection and love of women always partner with the worst case scenario in any situation. And that is a belittlement to all the good people in the world. Like if one woman says that the best way to make her husband happy is by feeding him, and another woman says the best way to make her man happy is giving him a cold beer after a long, hard day, and another woman says the best way to make her man happy is buying him a pair of shoes, then the woman who feeds her man don't necessarily have to change her routine and start getting him a beer. The woman who gives her man a beer don't necessarily have to change his routine and get him sneakers. The dude who likes sneakers, his wife don't necessarily have to change her routine and start buying him sandals. Like, the whole purpose of marriage and understanding is to understand the person you're with or understand the person you depend on. So many people say that they want codependency, but they never take time to fully understand the mind of the people that they're interacting with. So when you learn to understand the mind of the people you're interacting with, then you can understand what it means to be a true friend or lover or business partner. But until the majority, the 80% of society actually stop and go, it ain't my place to tell that man or woman how to think. It ain't my place to tell that man or woman what career to follow. It ain't my place to tell that man or woman what they should do with their time on this earth. Because for one, we all agree, nobody knows how much time they have here. For two, we all agree, leadership is going where there wasn't a path created and create one. We all know that individual skills are very important to make a team. And the one skill that the majority of people lack is the ability to speak up for themselves, even if it goes against what the majority says. They may do it in private. They may smoke a blunt or smoke a joint or pop a pill or drink some alcohol or go attend some event, and they're like, you know what? I never really agreed with that rule, but it's easier to comply. That's admitting to being enslaved. You know what? I never really cared for that, but they keep giving it to me, so I guess I got to do it. That is a form of compliancy, aka a form of enslavement. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong to want to help somebody else. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm actually saying it's good to want to help somebody else, because when you understand the concept of helping somebody else, then you understand how your individual opinion does not have to be the individual opinion of the person you're speaking with. Like if a bunch of guys from Texas go, we like trucks around here based on the terrain, the cattle, the loads that we got to do for the work we do, trucks are the best vehicle. If you take that same Texan out of Texas and put them in a more populated area like Columbia, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, New York, Los Angeles, California, and they start riding around the city in those big old trucks, they may realize that it's more efficient to have a smaller car or an SUV because of how narrow the roads are, because of how populated the city is, because of how small the parking areas are. So a part of knowing who you're dealing with is also knowing that people are capable of evolving and changing into a different mental state of life. When you're in elementary school, you learn elementary school stuff. And as you go through grade school, you learn different levels of knowledge. It's the same with a human evolving from a country person to being a city person, from a city person being a person who lives in a villa, from a rude city person to a nice city person, from white racist to a white person who accepts all cultures, from an Asian person growing up in Asia to coming over to America or some other country and adopting traditions from those other countries because it soothes their soul. True intelligence is knowing that everybody is capable of change, and real friendship, real partnership, and real love is allowing that person the space to change. I once told a buddy of mine, the worst thing I hate in society is how people refuse to let me outgrow the small circles that they know me in because it suits the narrative that they want to tell about me. Some people will only know me as a restaurant manager. Some people will only know me as a drug dealer. aka street pharmacist. Some people will only know me as a classmate. Some people will only know me as an athlete. Some people will only know me as a sex partner. Some people will only know me as a mentor. Some people will only know me as a person who stepped in as a politician or to give a speech at the local town halls. Some people will only know me based on the moment that they encountered me and the event that took place in that moment. And I'm okay with that. What I refuse to accept, though, is that whatever moment that they met me in and whatever knowledge or activity we partaked in that moment is the only limitation to who I am. Because that is an insult to me and it's a showcase of their ignorance. I don't know how many different ways I have to explain that people are capable of change. And even when people don't change, people are still capable of doing more than one activity in life and not being labeled by just that one activity. Like, I don't get labeled as a mathematician even though I super excel in math. I don't get labeled as a wordsmith even though I'm great at formulating sentences and sentence structures. I don't get labeled as a highly comprehensive person, but I do get labeled as a drug dealer, as a gangbanger, as a bad father, when all of the things that are correlated to the being of who I am are more than just the bad things or the things that are perceived bad by the people who were taught to fear the things that are deemed bad. Like, let's take Charlie Sheen, one of America's highest paid actors at one point. He done more drugs and more prostitutes than almost every man on the face of this earth. And yet, he gets praised as an outspoken leader in the industry, right? He's still alive. He's still doing his thing. And yet, people who are afraid to do it, they go, oh, well, it could kill you, but he's still alive. Oh, well, you could be judged bad, but I'm still alive. Oh, well, you could cause somebody else to find motivation through your actions to do the same, and I'm still alive. One thing for certain is we do not raise other people's kids. They raise themselves. Yes, they may find leadership, they might find guidance, they might find inspiration, and they might find motivation through the actions and the words of people they encounter. But they still have the consciousness to decide whether or not they want to follow that leadership, that guidance, that mentorship, or those words of encouragement or letdown within themselves. So for those who operate off of fear, I'll say again, stop putting your limitations on those who are fearless. If people only operated out of fear, then we would still have enslavement. If people only operated out of fear, we would have never broke sound barriers. If people only operated out of fear, then we would not be the thriving humanity race that we have today. If people only operated out of fear, women wouldn't have started fighting back against the abuse of men. If we only operated out of fear, then children wouldn't speak up for what they believe in. If we only operated out of fear, then we wouldn't have multiple religions. If we only operated out of fear, we wouldn't have different styles of vehicles. We wouldn't have different styles of television. We wouldn't have different styles of whatever it is that makes the neurological sensories inside of the human brain feel a sense of accomplishment. So for those who operate out of fear, the best thing we ask for y'all to do is just step aside and let us live our lives. We're tired of people operating out of fear, trying to control us and teach us to fear as if we don't already survive enough things in this world that were designed to either hold us down or judge us for not having it. If a person lives in a mansion and another person lives in an apartment complex and another person lives in a tent and another person lives in a shack and another person has no residence at all, every single one of them could say something about the other four that goes, well, I don't care because this is what I'm doing. I don't care because this is why you're doing that. I don't care because you were told to do that. I don't care because somebody else said I should do that. We can all sit back and debate over which lifestyle is better and why. A person who has to get up every day and jump on command, whether it be a rapper who has to meet his concert dates or he loses the love of his fans. If a rapper quit making music, then he or she no longer gets entertainment from the music industry. If an artist quit painting, if an athlete quit playing, if a mother quits mothering, if a father quits fathering, at the end of the day, It is their individual decision. And it's not up to us to chastise those people for their individual way of thinking. At most, we can understand them. At the highest level of consciousness, we can decide whether or not we want to be those type of people. Now, the middle ground, at least we can understand. At most, we can find inspiration. And in the middle ground, we can be supportive or avoidant. But what we should never, ever do, especially if you're a Christian, saying only God can judge, thou shalt not judge. If you are a so-called Christian or religious person, it is not your place. That is the word of your God. That is the word of the believers of that God to not judge. So before you go pointing fingers at somebody saying, well, the Bible said, my mama said, my daddy said, the teacher said, the principal said, the leader said, the lieutenant, the major, like before you go pointing any finger based on what somebody else said, always stop and ask the person that you're talking to, is it okay if I give you advice? And 9 times out of 10, I promise most people will probably say no. Because most people would rather live the life that they're living instead of having their flaws pointed out. Most people would rather, well, not even flaws, their individual decisions. Because individual decisions may not necessarily be a flaw. For a person who takes Percocets prescribed by a doctor, it may help them get through their day-to-day life. For a person who doesn't take it, congratulations, you still get through your day-to-day life. But it isn't a person who doesn't take it, place or authority to tell people who do, oh, well, you know that's bad for you, because I'm sure it came with a surgeon's general warning. Oh, well, you shouldn't do that. I'm sure they know the ups and downs of their decisions. So if they still choose to make the decision, like people say women shouldn't have children out of wedlock, women still do it. People say that men should pay for the first date, but independent women don't mind stepping up to take the tab. People say that we shouldn't curse, but people still do it. People say that we should want the finer things in life, but there's a lot of people who don't want to chase it. There's people who say people should be paid fair and equal pay, but yet they support systems that don't support fair and equal pay. So if a person's intellect is what's supposed to determine what they get paid, how do we decide who gets paid what if the people with a higher intellect is usually frowned upon by people who either don't match the excellence of another person's intellect, or if it's frowned upon by people who rather enforce the rules of tyranny and ignorance instead of accepting a higher way of thinking? And I don't mean by drugs, but a more elevated, a more conscious way of thinking. It's your boy, the modern day God, modern day Jesus, modern day Messiah, Dr. Anthony A.J. Pope. For those who want to tear down this video, by all means, shoot your shot. I promise you I may not respond to it with comments. I may think something in the moment when I read it or if I hear it from you. But at the end of the day, your response to my self-awareness is the least thing that I'm worried about in this world. The most important thing that I'm worried, let me rephrase that. Your negative response to how highly I think of myself is the least thing that I'm concerned with in this world. The most important things I'm concerned about in this world are the 2 kids that are allegedly mine, the 4 nieces, 5 nephews, 2 sisters, 1 brother, a few cousins, a mom, a couple ex-girlfriends, and maybe some strangers that could potentially be business partners. Anything outside of that is not the most important thing of my concern. All right? And I will give you enough respect to say what's important to you may not be the most important thing to me. And I'm conscious enough to accept that without any argumentative decisions. So therefore, if you're allegedly a conscious person in this so-called free nation, then the best thing you can do for this nation is to stop ridiculing other people who think independently and who think differently, because we all will have individual thoughts and think independently based on what we see, what we perceive, and what we choose to accept. And if I can't make this any clearer, I will say this with all due disrespect: mind your motherfucking business, and you won't have to worry about other people getting involved in your business unless they're willing to help. But as long as you subconsciously or even consciously call yourself trying to tear down other people for doing the things that you are too afraid to do for yourself, then you will always have what I call negative energy surrounding who you are as an individual. Therefore, it will repel people instead of attract. And again, it's the modern day God, the modern day Jesus, the modern day Messiah. Dr. Anthony A.J. Pope. Y'all have a blessed one.